Okay, let's unpack this. We've got a stack of sources here, articles, lore notes, historical accounts, all centered around one of the most beautiful and perhaps most complex places on the continent, Felwithe, and the elegant people who built it.
Indeed. We're undertaking a deep dive into the history, culture, and intricate details of Felwithe, the majestic city of the High Elves, known to themselves as the Coada Dal in the world of Norath.
Our mission for you today is to cut through the, information overload, extract the most important nuggets of knowledge, and help you become truly well-informed about these fascinating beings and their golden city.
Think of this as your shortcut to understanding the heart of High Elf society.
Yeah, what makes them tick, why their city looks the way it does, and maybe why they interact with the world the way they do. So let's start at the beginning. Who are the Coada Dal? Our sources consistently identify them as the High Elves, centered primarily in the stunning city of Felwithe on Felwithe.
And what immediately stands out, I think, is their profound self-identity. They see themselves as the chosen children of Tunor, the mother of all, believing they are the most direct descendants of the original elves she created. And this isn't just like a historical footnote.
No, it seems foundational.
It's the absolute bedrock of their society. Deep devotion to Tunor.
And you see that faith physically represented in Felwithe itself. The sources describe the city's famous walls built of white stone, but they're said to give off a faint glow all their own.
That golden light, yeah. It symbolizes their deep connection to Tunor and their perceived purity.
Which is beautiful, absolutely. But it also feeds that reputation they have among other races for being, well...
A little haughty, standoffish.
Exactly, haughty.
And that perception ties directly into where esteem lies within their culture. You see, while the Coada Dal are renowned for their intelligence and skill with arcane arts, they produce masterful enchanters, magicians, wizards.
Top tier, really.
Oh, yeah. But the highest respect and influence, that's reserved for the paladins and clerics.
The holy warriors and priests.
Mm-hmm. Collectively known as the clerics of Tunor. They embody the spiritual and martial strength the Coada Dal value most.
So it shows that even their power, whether it's martial or magical, it's fundamentally linked back to their faith.
Precisely. It all comes back to Tunor.
Okay, let's trace their story back even further then, to their origins and what seems like a really defining moment in their history.
The lore tells us the High Elves were created by Tunor herself in her own image. They were considered her greatest creation.
Their ancient home was this vast, beautiful Eldar forest on the continent then known as Tunaria.
Which we now call Antonica, right? Life was apparently idyllic there, a direct connection to their mother goddess.
Until tragedy struck during the Age of Blood.
Right, the Tyrant of Fire, Silisek Ro. The sources say in a fit of jealousy over the elves' creations, he just unleashed his magic, burned the Eldar forest to ash.
Transforming it into the harsh desert of Ro we know today. Just devastating.
Utterly, and this devastation forced the surviving elves into a desperate, perilous migration. They had to cross the vast ocean of tears.
An expanse lore suggests is named for Tunaria's own sorrow over the loss of her forest and, well, so many of her children.
Leading the Coada Dal through this immense trial was a hero named Alyssa Felwithe. She's the one who guided them across that perilous sea to the shores of a new land.
A continent they named Felwithe.
And this whole period, the destruction of Eldar Forest, the arduous journey across the Ocean of Tears, it isn't just history.
No, it feels like more than that.
It's the source material for a deep foundational racial trauma. It's like this collective wound that profoundly shapes their culture.
Probably contributing to those protective, maybe even isolationist tendencies we see later on.
Almost certainly. But their arrival and the founding of Felwithe and their cousin city, Celithin, it's also presented as this powerful testament
to their resilience.
Exactly. Their resilience, their unwavering faith in Tunor's guidance, who they believe led them to safety, and just their sheer determination to rebuild.
It's interesting. The sources mentioned they initially tried to rebuild their former capital, Takashuz, right there on Felwithe.
They did. Shows how deeply tied they were to their history, that lost glory. But things diverged.
That's where their wood elf cousins, the Fear Dal, come in. They chose a different path.
Right. Settling in the trees of the Great Feydark, wanting to live closer to nature in Celithin.
So while philosophical differences kind of emerged from this separation, Felwithe remained the primary elven capital, the heart of the Coada Dal.
And this entire origin story, Tunora's direct creation, her perceived sorrow, their kind of miraculous survival, it's just central to the High Elves' self-image.
It really fuels that strong sense of divine destiny, doesn't it?
Absolutely. A belief that their very existence is a continuation of Tunor's plan. And this conviction reinforces their whole societal structure, centered on Tunor's will.
And underpins that sense of being a chosen race, which probably contributes heavily to how other races perceive them.
No doubt. It's all interconnected.
Okay, so now let's move from their history to the physical manifestation of their identity. The city of Felwithe itself, named, fittingly, in honor of Alyssa Felwithe.
Their guiding hero, yeah. And the sources describe its construction as this really unique blend. It wasn't just built by high elves alone.
Right, it incorporates beautiful and delicate magical elf work alongside, what was it, earth dwarven labor?
Exactly.
Yeah.
From their early allies, the dwarves of Caladium.
What's fascinating here is that this blend isn't just some practical detail. It's like a tangible symbol of a deep foundational alliance, forged in necessity when they first arrived on Felwithe.
That early cooperation with the dwarves seems far more significant than the mere tolerance for dwarven services that some sources mention later. There's a bit of a disconnect there.
Definitely something to keep in mind. Architecturally, the city sounds striking. They use practical materials, sure, like unpainted heavy wood and whitewashed walls.
But they make it fantastic, as the sources say, with liberal use of vibrant paints, glittering gems, precious metals, and these intricate magical carvings.
And of course, those famous glowing golden walls are real, surrounding the city along with a crystalline moat and a grand white marble gate.
Wow. At one time, its beauty was said to be rivaled only by the human city of Kainos. Quite a statement.
And they seamlessly integrate magic into the environment, too. You find things like a mage tower just suspended in the air.
Yeah. And glowing platforms used for teleportation between key locations. Its utility and beauty, all powered by the Archaeer.
Very efficient, very elven.
The city itself is clearly divided into two main sections, North Felwithe and South Felwithe.
Okay, North Felwithe, that's the commercial and spiritual heart, right? This is where you find the Felwithe Keeper, their bank.
And key bankers like Tintel and Rallison. Crucially, it houses the Paladin and Cleric guilds.
Explicitly named as the pride of the city, reinforcing that value they place on divine service.
Exactly. This area also has various shops for their crafts and supplies, like the Shop of All Hallows or Emerald Armor.
The sources even point out Fadark's Bane, which has a kiln and pottery wheel right outside, so even practical trades are right there.
Integrated, yeah. And for leisure, there are taverns known for fine wines, like Tovania's Venom or the Felwithe Fish House and the Traveler's Home Inn.
There's a really striking detail mentioned in the sources, found in the Paladin Guild basement.
Ah, yes, the secret tunnels.
Leading directly to the ramparts, hidden behind a fake wall. A hidden defensive layer, right within the city's spiritual core. Fascinating.
Then you have South Felwithe, which serves as the arcane district, catering to the spellcasters.
So that's where you go for magical gear, and the gateway to the Keepers of the Art, their renowned magical academy, is located there.
That's the one. The entrance sounds unique, too. A small marble building suspended magically over a pond.
With glowing platforms that teleport you to the separate guild halls for each magical discipline. Wow.
That's right. The Amethyst Palace for Wizards, led by Tarker Blaistos, the Ruby Palace for Magicians under Neola Impolder, and the Jade Palace for Enchanters, guided by Kinul Goldsinger.
Quite the setup.
And these halls are said to hold historical tomes, even ancient records about the lost city of Takishiz.
So knowledge is preserved there, too.
Definitely. The sources also mention an extensive river flowing through this part of the city, making fishing apparently a common pastime for residents there.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and look at the character of the Coattabel people themselves, beyond just the physical city. How are they described?
They're described as reserved, contemplative people, often compared in nature to the erudites. Quiet thought is the norm.
This introspective nature pairs with refined tastes, like their preference for fine wines over simpler stuff.
But a really key detail, I think, revealing the nature of their society is the explicit absence of open markets or the associated undesirables within Felwithe's walls.
Right. That absence points to a society that is incredibly ordered, controlled even.
And this is further emphasized by the presence of heavily armed knights, appointed directly by King Tirith Thucex.
With the explicit mandate to strike down any who have earned the disdain or ill will of the Coattabel. That's quite direct.
It really reveals a society that prioritizes strict order, internal control, and homogeneity above almost everything else. It's this desire for purity and exclusion.
Which, while maybe stemming from a wish for peace and quiet thought, you can see how it lays the groundwork for later, more rigid ideas.
Particularly that emphasis on purity of blood we see emerging later.
Looking at their racial characteristics, they're widely considered the most majestic of the light elven races. Naturally high intelligence, wisdom, makes them adept with arcane magic.
Though maybe not as physically strong as some races, their strong sense of honor and courage often leads them down those paths of paladins and clerics.
Their noble appearance often comes across as haughtiness to outsiders, we mentioned that, and they're inherently aligned with good, possess infravision, standard elf traits, but refined perhaps.
Governance is centered around King Tirithethix, a monarch whose reign has spanned centuries. Very long-lived.
With his daughter, Felwithe, known as the Chosen of Tuneri, designated as heir. Famous figure.
Indeed. And the foundation of their societal structure is something called the Code of the Coatadal.
This code is presented in the sources as supposedly laid down by Tunor herself way back in the time of Takishas.
And it's kept and strictly enforced by the priesthood. While the sources don't detail every single tenet, the fact that it's enforced by those powerful religious figures really highlights the deep intertwining of faith and law.
You can't separate them.
Not really. The sources list various influential factions within Felwithe, too, indicating concentrations of power and maybe differing viewpoints, even within this ordered society.
So you have the dominant clerics of Tunor and the keepers of the art.
Alongside the king's faction, merchants, servants, the Tunerian court, and the Fadarch's champions, lots of groups.
But intriguingly, an anti-mage faction is also mentioned. That suggests internal divisions exist, despite the outward appearance of unity and order.
Definitely hints at underlying tensions, and this internal dynamic seems to shift significantly over time.
Yeah, the sources note that in later periods, specifically the Age of Cataclysms, a powerful entity known as the High Council asserts much greater control.
They enact laws that stress purity of blood as paramount and demand total loyalty from citizens.
Which marks a clear move towards a more insular, potentially authoritarian, and explicitly exclusionary model of society.
Leveraging their belief in being Tuner's chosen race to justify increasingly strict controls. A dark turn, perhaps.
Seems like it. Now, at the very core of all this, Coatadal identity is their unwavering devotion to Tunar, the mother of all.
Right. Their beliefs are fascinating. They see all living beings as Tunari's children, believe Norath itself is a living entity.
And their ultimate objective is to protect the living world, even to the point of sacrificing their own lives.
Their cosmology is beautiful, really interconnected. Norath birthed Tunar, and Tunari then birthed all life.
So worshipping the land isn't just reverence for nature. It's seen as paying homage to the mother of their mother. Deep stuff.
Very. Other followers of Tunar include druids, rangers, and many other Elven peoples, of course.
Tunari herself is typically depicted in lore as a tall, beautiful elven woman, often in green and gold with blonde hair intertwined with vines.
She's a goddess of light and good, which naturally makes her a primary target for dark deities like Inaruk and Bertoxulus.
But she has powerful allies in the pantheon, like Karana, Erelisi Mar, and Rodset Knife.
Within Felwithe, the Chapel of Tunar is a central point, overseen by High Priest Yolorn Bronzeleaf.
And the sources emphasize his zealous protection of the Coatadal against their enemies, particularly the Tyrdal, the Dark Elves.
It really highlights how their deep faith isn't just spiritual. It plays a very active, often aggressive role in the city's defense and political stances. Faith in action.
We've mentioned several key figures throughout this deep dive, and the sources really highlight their significance to the Coatadal story.
You have Alyssa Felwithe, obviously the essential leader of their migration and the city's namesake. King Tirithethix, their long-reigning monarch, providing continuity and authority.
His daughter and heir, Felwithe, the Chosen of Tunar, known for her significant role in pivotal events like the Battle of Bloody Kithikor.
Then there's High Cleric Sarthan Leafwind, the figure credited with codifying that foundational code of the Coatadal.
General Jaileel, that NPC connected to those intriguing secret tunnels in the Paladin Guild.
And High Priest Yolorn Bronzeleaf, the powerful and zealous High Priest of Tunar and Cleric Guildmaster we just mentioned, a key player.
And we can't forget the leaders of their arcane power base. The Guildmasters are the Keepers of the Art. Tarker Blazetoes for Wizards, Canol Goldsinger for Enchanters, and Neola Impholder for Magicians.
Right. All these figures across the spectrum of their society, they really reflect the Coatadal's self-perception, their history of survival, their belief in divine superiority, and their strict adherence to their code. They embody the ideals.
Okay, finally, let's look at perhaps the most dynamic aspect of their identity, how they interact with other races. Our sources paint a really complex picture here.
It's a mix, yeah. Crucial historical alliances and bitter, enduring conflicts.
Their relationship with their cousins, the Wood Elves or Fyradal of Kelethin, is historically harmonious, right?
Supposedly. They separated upon arriving on Feydwar due to those philosophical differences about living closer to nature.
But High Elves still view them formally as close friends and loyal servants, even subjects of the Felwithian king.
Yet, the sources note potential strains. They mention events like the War of Fey, where accounts suggest Felwithe offered little or no direct help when Kelethin was attacked.
That hints at potential limits to that bond, doesn't it? And maybe an increasing focus inward by the Coatadal.
Seems plausible. Then there's their alliance with the Dwarves of Caladim. That was immediate and vital upon reaching Feydwar.
Absolutely essential for the physical construction of Felwithe, combining elven magic and dwarven labor. We covered that.
But despite this deep historical bond, the sources state High Elves generally only tolerate dwarves for their valuable services or commodities later on.
Highlighting that apparent contradiction between past partnership and present perception again. Strange.
It is. They view other good races, like humans, gnomes, and halflings, as worthy companions, respecting their positive qualities.
Barbarians and erudites are also tolerated, often for specific valued services they provide. So, a hierarchy of tolerance, almost.
Seems like it. When it comes to adversaries, High Elves generally loathe evil races, but the most profound and ancient conflict is absolutely reserved for the Dark Elves, the Tyrdal.
Their origin story is just brutal. Twisted by the dark god Inaruk, kidnapped and tortured into a new form.
And adding fuel to this ancient fire are legends, often denied by modern Coatadal, that Felwithe is actually built upon the raised ruins of the Tyrdal's former capital, Curthiel.
Wow, that's a heavy claim.
Even deeper lore, like the War of the Broken Crown, paints this picture of Inaruk as the original god of all elves.
The Tyrdal being loyalists and the Coatadal rebels.
Exactly. The High Elves allegedly destroyed Curthiel and founded Felwithe precisely where the Elven emperor who followed Inaruk was murdered. The Loyalists, the future Dark Elves, fled to Neriak, forever plotting revenge.
That ancient animosity isn't just history, then. It's an ongoing, active conflict, marked by invasions.
And fervent opposition from figures like High Priest Yelar and Bronzeleaf. Felwithe itself was even briefly captured during a siege in the Age of Turmoil.
So the threat is real and present.
Very much so. Other threats they face include the Crushbone Orcs from Greater Feydark, while a common foe for adventurers.
And accounts mention guards defending Kelethin and brownies breaking an orc siege.
The sources suggest the Wood Elves bear the primary burden of this immediate threat compared to Felwithe's direct involvement. Maybe they see it as Kelethin's problem.
Could be. And then there's the insidious, corrupting threat of Maong Mistmore, the ancient elf vampire from Castle Mistmore.
Yes. The sources note his anxiety about the elven holy site of Feganin near his castle and his attacks on elves there.
But more disturbingly, during the Age of Turmoil, Mistmore managed to infiltrate Felwithe itself, even courting Queen Lenyathanex.
That's what the lore says. And he created the Dreelocks, these twisted, corrupted creatures explicitly found within the city.
That signifies a direct and terrifying infiltration of their supposed purity, a nightmare scenario for them.
Absolutely. And this whole history of conflict and trauma seems to have fundamentally altered the Coatadal over time.
Yeah, the sources note a significant shift by the Age of Destiny, where they are no longer the welcoming and kind-hearted people they once were.
They've become fearful of outsiders and protect their isolation violently.
So this transformation from a proud, albeit perhaps aloof society, to one marked by fear, aggression towards outsiders, and fierce isolationism.
It appears to be a direct outcome of these enduring conflicts, coupled with the increasing control of the High Council and that growing rigid emphasis on purity of blood. It's a complex evolution. So what does this all mean, wrapping up? We've seen how the Coatadal's origin story, their divine creation and devastating loss, isn't just trivia.
No, it's the traumatic foundation upon which their entire identity is built. This history is literally carved into the stone and magic of Felwithe.
A city designed to reflect their ideals of purity, order, and divine favor, even incorporating those early alliances born of necessity.
And we've traced how that identity, centered on unwavering devotion to Tunar and governed by their ancient code, has shaped their interactions with the world.
From the complex bonds with their cousins and former allies like the dwarves, to the ancient, bitter conflicts with the dark elves.
And the insidious threat of corruption, like that posed by Maung Mismor, it's shaped them profoundly.
The deliberate control and enforced homogeneity within Felwithe, initially perhaps a response to trauma and a desire for order,
Seems to have culminated in a society that uses concepts like purity of blood to justify increasing insularity and a fearful reaction to the outside world.
This deep dive reveals a society whose history hasn't stayed in the past. It lives and breathes in the very walls of their city and the hearts of its people.
Transforming them, from a proud, maybe somewhat haughty race into one marked by fear and fierce isolationism.
Which raises an important question, I think, for you to consider as you reflect on the Kawada doll. When faced with persistent threats and the complexities of a diverse world, does a society built on ideals of divine purity and strict control find true security and strength? Or does it ultimately become a gilded cage of its own making?